episode of Slaying with Dice, Ed and Games' show dedicated to all things RPG. I'm Dave, your host, and on today's show, we're going to be looking at Old School Essentials retro adventure game by Necrotic Gnome Games out of the UK. So, Old School Essentials is an adaptation of what we call the BX D&D. That is Basic / Expert D&D. That was originally published as 2 box sets by Tom Moldvay back in 1981. They featured iconic cover art by Errol Otis, and they introduced, they had iconic adventures included with them, such as Keep on the Borderlands and Isle of Dread. This is the kind of D&D, the version of D&D that many people grew up on. One thing that makes it different for those of you playing later or more modern editions, it features races as class, for instance. So, Dwarf is a character class. Elf is a character class. Halfling is a character class. And then you have 4 core character classes of Fighter, Cleric, Thief, and Magic User that are all assumed to be humans. That is one big thing that sets it apart from the modern RPGs where you pick race and class, especially modern versions of D&D and advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Other things, spell lists tend to be very simplified. The stat blocks for monsters, very, very simplified. Everything is designed for theater of the mind. That is, not using battle mats and battle grids and miniatures. They can be integrated. In short, it's a rule set that tends to be more simple and rely on more imagination for your character background and some of the other elements in the game. It doesn't try to provide a mechanic for everything. Now, that being said, a lot of people use house rules and create house rules and optional rules. In fact, back in the day, there would be people would do this all the time, and they would add these rules. People still do it to this day with their RPGs. The simpler the rule set, the simpler the framework, the easier it is to add these without breaking the system. And for instance, there was articles all the time in Dragon Magazine that would be offering optional rules and new spells and things like that to use, and monsters to use with your D&D. So the house rules, basically, that were published in the magazine. So with all that being said, like I said, we're going to look at this from that standpoint of it's a re-envisioning of a classic edition of D&D that is very popular still with a lot of people. So it comes in 2 formats. It comes in this Rules Tome hardcover. It's a nice thick hardcover, and then it comes in this big box set right here. Nice thick box set. There's 2 different formats. And we'll get back to the difference between the formatting. The main thing you need to know is that, right off the bat, the contents, basically, as far as the information here and here, are the same. So that's the first thing. What we have here is, and they tell you right up front, what their goal is to do is to provide this update. They've cleaned up the original rules, presented them in a more modern format that's accessible not only to older players, but even from the get-go in the beginning of this book, it's geared towards introducing people brand new to RPGs. They're taking that approach. This isn't just for people looking for nostalgia. This is for people looking for new players, new to RPGs. There's an opportunity here. It explains terms, etc. It's all there. This also includes the handy tabs right here on the side so you can access information. There's that. There's also handy reference inside the front and back covers. Very nice. Couple of ribbon bookmarks. The game, like I said, it's going to be very familiar to BX players, but it's also designed with bringing some new players into a different version of D&D than the current 5th edition, and give them the opportunity to kind of do some old school adventures. Of course, here's the thing: there's all these great classic adventures that have been written for this rule set, and that's one thing. You have those adventures available And now you have these rules that can go with it. This is not the first what we call retro clone out there. There are others that have been out there before this, looking to present a version of BX or some similar older version of D&D. So this is not the first, but it is definitely one of the best laid out that I've seen. It's also one of the most attractive as far as the presentation. And a nice touch also is in the back. There is a section of author's notes. So this will appeal very much to those who have played those classic editions, because it goes section by section and talks about some of the things that they have cleaned up or changed, like how they're just simple things. Like in the original rules, it didn't expressly state that halflings know how to speak halfling. That's a little thing in there that they've cleaned up. It talks about the reason why, for instance, they included ascending armor class. There's the classic to hit matrix in here for all the classes, so never fear. But there's also, they include THAC0, and they also include ascending AC. So if people want to use those optional rules for combat, they can. And in the author's notes in the back, they explain their mindset behind that. And it goes through, like I said, fairly extensive spells, magic items, etc. Things that they did just to clean up, like from the original edition. So I think that's another thing that makes this, sort of sets it apart. It's, as it says, 100% old school rules, 100% modern design. And I think, like I said, I think it's one of the best presentations I've seen out there. If you're running BX, I think it's definitely worth owning. It's definitely worth checking out. Now, in addition to this, besides this, there's a couple other volumes they've come out with. They've come out with the genre rules. So the genre rules, you take the core rules and then you can add these. This is the advanced fantasy. So as you might expect, this offers additional character classes that you can use to expand upon the character classes here. So you can still do it. And for instance, one of the character classes is Drow. So you could do like Elf here, but then instead they have Drow. They have Bard. They have Illusionist. They have Druid. All those are included in here. They also offer the option of character races. So if you want to simulate advanced Dungeons and Dragons and do race and class separate, you can do that. And the rules for how to do that are in here. In addition, of course, go along with this, they have Druid and Illusionist spells. So that book has been released as well. And obviously this cover here is an homage to the classic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook. So very retro style artwork. And then we also have Winter's Daughter, which is an adventure. And all of these books, one nice thing, besides just the beautiful interior presentation, it's also the inside covers, because they have quick reference material in all these inside covers, and it's really well done. So I really appreciate that as from a game master standpoint, and even as a player standpoint, having the spell list and other rules related to that right inside the cover. That's very handy. So with that, that kind of segues us in. Well, what's the difference between these two products? Well, besides the cool factor of the box set, because box sets are cool, you have the same information, but it's been broken up into multiple volumes. So you have 5 separate little hardcovers in here. And each of these hardcovers, you got one that covers the core rules of the game. You got one that's got the classic fantasy genre rules. So this has got all the character class information for BX. And then you've got cleric and magic user spells, you've got monsters, and you've got treasures. And in each one of these, this is the thing that I think sets these two apart, is there's a couple factors. One, just from a practical standpoint, I can see if you have this box set and you're sitting around the table and somebody needs to look at, the DM's looking at monsters in this book, and then somebody needs to look at the spell. Well, somebody could be using this book on one end of the table, and while the DM doesn't have to give up his monsters or treasure book or the core rules or genre rules. So it's a more functional standpoint from that standpoint there. The other thing is also a functional issue is every single one of these hardcovers has quick reference on the inside covers, so that all the things related to the spells, for instance, are in this book on spells. So those reference charts are here. The genre rules, there's information, the saving throw charts by character class, or clerics turning undead, to hit charts, etc. Those are all listed, and every single volume has those references. So I could really appreciate it from a like I said, a Dungeon Master standpoint, having those reference materials available. Finally, if you do pick up the other books, or you need room for your dice, etc., there's enough room left in the box that you can fit everything in there. Actually a perfect fit for those other 3 volumes if you pick them up, and you can just put it all right down in that box set. So, if you may have heard of this product, or you're thinking about trying an older version of the game, but you want something that has a clear modern format, with some really nice new but retro style artwork inside, give this product a look. I encourage you to check it out in person. I think it's definitely worth having in the library, especially too if you want to run the classic versions of In Search of the Unknown, or Keep on the Borderlands, or Isle of Dread, that are found in the Goodman Games books, the original Adventures Reincarnated that we covered on a previous episode. This is a great rule set to sort of experience that, and then you can see the style difference between those original versions and maybe even 5th edition, for instance. And of course, thanks to the release, there's still physical copies out there, but there's lots of digital now copies available online of all those classic adventures. So you can experience a lot of the great adventures of early Dungeons and Dragons for yourself using this rule set. So come check it out. We have it in stock down at Ed and Games. You can browse through it yourself and decide. Beautiful thing. Everybody have a great time. Until next time, make sure you find some time to roll some dice. I'm Dave. Have a great day.